Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and I'm joined, as always, by Tim.
Thanks for having me.
You've said that a few times, every so often, and I'm not really sure why you keep coming back to it, especially since this is not a vampire movie, it's not a werewolf movie. Other than human fangs, there's not really any fangs in this movie. But...
It's scary. It's a horror podcast, and what better way to start than by scaring the people?
Oh, I'm sure they're all terrified. I'm sure they're all shaking in the boots. So yeah, it's a horror movie podcast. We get together, we've watched a horror movie, we talk about it. It's that simple. We are working through some 2020 movies right now that we felt that we should go back and check out. Now, admittedly, we're recording this way in advance. By the time you get this, it may even be the start of June by the time you get this episode. But for us, this is actually January, so we were just sort of going back and checking out some 2020 movies that have some buzz. And this episode is going to be about His House, which came out in October, just at the end of October, 2020. It is the feature-length directorial debut of Remy Weeks, and is about a South Sudan couple who are refugees, asylum seekers, who come to the UK, and they're given a house as part of a sort of probation living arrangement, and the house is haunted as shit, is the basic premise of it. And yeah, obviously you'd expect this film, given the premise of these refugees, that there's going to be some social stuff, some political stuff, and we'll get into some of that, of course, as we're talking about it. But there's a lot in here. So I describe it as a horror drama, and that there's a lot of real world drama mixed in with the horror stuff. But unlike Spontaneous from last week, it is definitely more of a horror movie, though, I would say,
without a doubt. Yeah.
So.
I think, I think people have put it in the ranks of stuff like Get Out, and which is I forget what they call it, like societal horror.
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of which I think it definitely fits in that category.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also horror.
There's horror. Yes. Yeah. No, I think I'm looking at the poster on IMDb, and I think one of the biggest problems for this movie's marketing is that the font of the title is just this plain white simple text, and the poster is just a couple surrounded by other kids, and the content. I know what scene this is kind of based on and what the context is important, but as a poster for a horror movie, it does not sell me a horror movie. It looks I don't know, it looks like a documentary almost on the poster. Is that sort of dull looking in terms of its style?
Yeah, I mean I think in general Netflix is pretty terrible with their marketing, unless it's something they spent billions on, your Brights or whatever.
Your Adam Sandler's Ridiculous Six or whatever it was called.
Yeah. But I mean, oftentimes though they do get cool little movies like this, but they just obviously are kind of just putting them out there, don't really care about it. And yeah, like you said, this one had some buzz, which is the only reason why I watched it, is because I remember right when it came out, people were talking about because since we're horror people, we follow a lot of horror people on Twitter and stuff, and there was definitely a lot of people going oh hey, make sure to check this out. It just kind of dropped on Netflix out of nowhere, but it's pretty good. And
I would never have looked at this if it hadn't gotten the buzz, and it hadn't started appearing in top 10 lists for the year and things like that. I would never have even thought of looking at it, just because it didn't look like a horror movie. It didn't look like any sort of movie that just again based on the poster, which again looks like it looks like not even just a documentary. It looks like a documentary that's made for TV. It looks like a documentary that would air, in the middle of the day on Channel 4 in the UK.
Yeah, and I don't remember ever getting a trailer for it. And admittedly, we haven't been doing trailers on the show for a while, but still again with bigger Netflix stuff, I remember when The Babysitter 2 got a trailer. I saw that floating around. So. Yeah,
we stopped doing news when we started banking episodes for paternity leave, which was right around the time this came out. So, and Netflix notoriously put out trailers 2 weeks before their movie comes out, usually. So, it's one of those things where it just, poorly marketed, I think. But that goes for 90% of Netflix's original movies, to be honest. regardless of quality. There's good movies that have been failed to be marketed. There's bad movies that they failed to market, and everything in between. So, but yeah, so we'll get into it basically then. Well, obviously we're starting spoiler free as we always do. Okay, just a little bit. I mentioned the paternity leave and stuff. I think it's worth mentioning just for people for context. This is actually the last episode of this show that we're reviewing or recording even, until Tim comes back. This is the last one before he leaves. So in theory,
that means I can say whatever the hell I want.
That's not what it means. You always say whatever the hell you want. What are we talking about?
That's true.
But so in theory, right, for you, it'll be this weird thing where you should have an episode next week. You should have an episode next week where Tim's hair is probably completely different. I mean, my hair may be completely different as well, admittedly, but I don't know why I'm saying I'm not going to change in the next 5 months, but Tim's going to be like, oh, I'm expecting that fatherhood to have a wacky effect on Tim's appearance.
We shall see.
I'm expecting your hair's all sticking up because you've been pulling at it and all sorts.
You missed her mom.
I've never seen that, but I'll just say sure.
Actually, I don't think I've seen it either. I've seen the movie cover for sure.
Yes, I only know what Mr. Mum is because I've heard people say, "What, they cast Mr. Mum as Batman?"
Yeah.
That's the only reason why I know what that movie is.
Now, what is are those rumors true that Michael Keaton's supposed to be the main Batman in the DC universe? No, I didn't really understand that.
They're still in the rumor phase. There's no concrete.
But what? I don't even understand what that means though, because there's no way he's doing I know he'll probably pop up in Flashpoint as an older Batman or whatever, but there's no way that's he's gonna be in a main Batman movie, playing Batman again. If anything, it'll be an older kind of mentor Batman figure, right?
Could be a Batman Beyond situation. Although I love that Tim said he was going to say whatever he wanted, and he's immediately tangented down a really specific comic book movie conversation, which has nothing to do with horror. Never mind his house. You rebel.
Yeah, I just thought it was weird.
So yes. So for us, there's going to be a 5-month gap. Maybe slightly less than that if we start sort of slowly coming back without a regular weekly schedule. But for us, there's going to be months between episodes. But for you, in theory, if all goes to plan, you'll just have an episode next week, and it'll be time travel happened.
Yeah.
And I imagine, I promised the first episode back with Tim would be Leprechaun in the Hood, or Leprechaun back in the Hood. But after that, I imagine we'll be starting here's the movies from the early 2021 that we've not done because Tim was away season. So look forward to that. But yes.
And what movies they will be?
I have no idea what they'll be because nothing's up in the air.
Yeah.
So Timmy.
Yeah.
What did you think of his house?
I mean, I really liked it. I thought it was great. It's the horror elements work, and I think the the kind of societal elements work. Again, there's horror stuff going on, but then I also liked kind of the stuff where they're just trying to adjust to the situation of being strangers in this kind of strange land, especially
yeah, the UK, such a strange land. Yeah. So.
Well, I mean, it's very different than
from their perspective. I get what you mean, but it was funny to me.
Specifically, there's one sequence where the wife Rial, I believe.
Yeah, Rial. Yeah.
Where she just kind of has to go out and just do something real simple as going to a doctor's office or anything, but it becomes this ordeal, and the way it's filmed though is really they film it like a horror movie, make it very unsettling and kind of dark, and just a simple thing like that I think works really well. But it's a very small cast, but I think all the the two main performers do a really good job, and it is definitely hard to talk about without going into spoilers. But I think once maybe about 2/3 of the way through, once you kind of find out why this is going on and what happened, I thought this is really effective and messed up, and I was oh Jesus, wow. I was not expecting like something like this dark, kind of be like the precipice for everything. But no, I mean, I thought it all worked really well though.
Yeah, I thought it was very strong. I think the two lead actors give wonderful performances. There's moments where Ball, the husband, he is trying to keep it together. He's trying to keep his cool, but he'll just like these sort of like, almost like nervous, almost crazy looking smiles will break through, and it feels very natural, and it feels very like he's trying to hold it together. And yeah, I mean, I think there's the horror stuff, and there's the social stuff, and by social stuff I mean like the actual refugee style of things, and all the limitations that are put on them, because they come to the UK, they're given this house, and it's actually a relatively big house, the sort of thing that you're given by the government or the council tends to be smaller than this. So they're kind of lucky in a lot of ways that they've been given this bigger house, but it's in shit shape. It needs cleaned up, it needs decorated. Yeah. There's trash all over the front of the front garden, but just all the little things, like the ways people react to them, the some of it casual racism, some of it xenophobia, some of it just kind of a jealousy. There's kind of a. And one could argue, like, is there much point in separating racism from xenophobia? But I do think there was a slight difference between them. And I think both are at play at different points in this movie, and you can kind of see. The thing that really stuck out to me is the line, "Your house is bigger than mine," is said a few times by people who clearly resent the idea that they've been giving this place for, essentially free, and they've been given this help. And they're getting out this this war-torn, like very awful like living situation, and we don't get the full context of what they've escaped until quite late on in the movie, but obviously we have assumptions for much of the film. And I think that stuff, and I think the characters that play with each other are really good, where Rial, she is very much wanting to hold on to her heritage and her past and who she is, and doesn't want to forget where they came from. Whereas Ball, he wants to adjust, he wants to fit in, he wants to buy a fancy polo shirt and fit in like everyone else and sing songs at the pub. He wants to feel like he's in this new world and this is his home now, and he's left that past behind. And it's not a surprise, I think, that both of them have to kind of like meet in the middle essentially, and he has to still accept his past, accept whatever he's done to get here. She has to also kind of learn that they have to move on, they have to accept their new world and do things. But yeah, all these things and all the social commentary and the way people treat them, and how no one seemingly has much sympathy. There's a few platitudes that are given, but everyone around them, they're just kind of almost bored. This is their day-to-day job. Like, okay, here's refugees number 782. Here's your welcome pack. Here's your house. Here's and to them, like, when they're told they're being given a house and a probation period, they essentially start crying and laughing of happiness, because like, oh, we're getting a fresh start. And the people who are giving them this and telling them this information they're in business suits. They're just sitting there. They look half asleep. They don't care. It's all very cold and distant. And there's this kind of just this jarring, stark difference of, these people have fought through hell to get out of where they live, to get somewhere else for a better start and a better tomorrow, and everyone is just kind of like, don't be in it, don't be a problem, don't make a fuss, just do what you're told and fit in.
Yeah, like to them this is life changing. Like this can kind of be like the matter between life and death, if they can make it here versus if they have to like go back or whatever. But yeah, to the to these white business people in the government or whatever, like it's just like a normal work day is very like, okay, yeah, come on, make sure you're one of the good ones, like.
Yeah, that phrase is used a couple of times, and I cringed because Matt Smith, Doctor Who, he shows up. He's like the guy who shows him the house. He has a couple lines, and he's clearly nicer than a lot of the other characters who are like higher up or whatever. He's trying a little bit to be understanding, but it still kind of feels like he's definitely coming from a system that's baked in like xenophobia and racism, because of the way he says, "Oh, be one of the good ones." It feels a little like, you know, we're expecting you to be a problem, so be one of the good ones and don't be a problem.
It's like you said earlier, it's like that casual racism, which sometimes like it can almost be like a little more cringy sometimes than like out and out racism, because it's like there's this, I don't know, just level of like like kind of like you're trying to hide it, or that like, you know, you don't think what you're doing is necessarily wrong, but it's still like messed up.
Yeah, I think actually, and I don't think this is too spoiler to go into this scene, but I think one of the more powerful scenes in the movie is the scene you were mentioning earlier, where Rial goes outside, and it's shot kind of like a horror movie, where she's trying to like find her way to this doctor's office, and she ends up in like a bit of a maze of like sort of back little pathways and like, you know, all these like fenced gardens and stuff. She gets kind of lost, and she goes up to these teenagers to ask for directions, but notably the 3 teenagers she goes up to are all black, and I think this scene's quite powerful because I think, you know, there's maybe a feeling of comfort to her. She sees 3 black people and she thinks, oh, they'll be more helpful. I'm more comfortable asking them for help. And they're kind of useless because they don't really know what, you know, where they're pointing her to. But B, they're kind of awful, and they're very xenophobic. The phrase "go back to Africa" is uttered. They make fun of her for not speaking English. And I think as she walks away from that encounter and she's got tears in her eyes, like she feels like she's an alien in this world. She feels that she doesn't belong. She feels that no one's here to help her. No one's looking out for her.
And yeah, I mean by itself that's already like a pretty powerful scene, but like also it's just so well done because the way it's filmed is very like disorienting, because like the camera is constantly moving around while all these, you know, 3 different kids are, you know, giving her like completely different information, like, oh no, it's down that street, no, you got it wrong, it's the other way, oh no, I think it's this way. And so it's like, yeah, like, and then the music too is like kind of like this creepy, unsettling like horror music. So it's I mean, yeah, by itself it's already good, but then it's just the filmmaking elevates it to this really like, just like you know, it puts you in her shoes where it's so disorienting and like you don't know what's real, and
it's literally spinning. It's literally spinning around as she's getting all this information that's all, you know, clashing with each other. And you know, that's where I'd say it's, you know, it's not just racism and xenophobia. It's this you know, it's cultures on top of that, and like, and I totally buy this as well. Like, you know, like teenagers are shitheads at times.
Oh, for
like,
sure.
I've definitely heard British school kids say shitty things like this without thinking that's a big deal. Like thinking they're just, you know, cracking a dumb joke or whatever.
It's so weird. Like I feel like if I said that, like I would still be thinking about it. You know, like,
today you'd be like 20 years later. Oh, I can't believe I said that. You know, once. You know, I think that's, you know, there's that, and there's various other powerful scenes, and simple little things that you don't really think about, which is that he's adjusting to using cutlery, which is not even something I'd have thought about that was different, but. She doesn't like it. She says, "Oh, all I taste is the metal," when she's using the fork, and I was thinking, that's so like, taste the metal. I don't taste metal when I'm using a fork, but it never occurred to me that someone who's never used a metal fork before might almost think it's intrusive. This feels weird. This
yeah, there's like a lot of little things like that. Especially like when they're eating, and like she's like on the floor, and like he's like, oh no, like we got to eat at the table, and it's a really interesting dynamic, like between him, who's like you're saying before, is he's so eager to assimilate, and you know, just like kind of completely wants to leave like the past behind, you know, versus her, who's like, you know, rightfully so, kind of, you know, feels like, oh, that, you know, this isn't right, there's like, you know, something's off here, like, and you know, we should be hanging on to like our old ways. So it's a lot of interesting stuff between that.
And of course, then you introduce the horror elements, which I think, you know, have some. I think it starts off, you know, a little typical. You know, it's just a jump scare here or there. There's a noise, a voice. You know, someone jumps out in the background or whatever. But as it goes, I think there's some really cool visuals in the horror.
Yeah.
There's very specific There's one particular mask that one of the, I guess, ghosts will say wears
Yeah.
that I thought was quite creepy.
Yeah, I like that. I thought it looked good. It's it's definitely like different looking than a lot of like kind of the CGI generic ghosts. I feel like we get a lot of.
Yeah, and I will say there's kind of a theme to the ghosts and the spirits, which I won't spoil because I think that's starting to get into details a little bit. But I think that theme was kind of effective and just giving it a distinct feel the entire time. Once you sort of started to get the hints of like what connects all the spirits and stuff, like it was quite interesting. So I think it's a really good movie where I think even just the raw social stuff of like them trying to like make it work and try to assimilate and try to survive in this neighborhood and become a part of this lifestyle, that already is kind of a horror movie just because it's so tense and awkward and they're trying hard and like there's the creepy neighbor who's always staring at the window at them and just nothing is very welcoming in any way, shape or form. No one cares that they're here. There's no welcome wagon, and it's not so much they expected a welcome wagon, but just how much of the opposite it is, which is no one gives a shit.
There's one scene where like I mean I don't know if British kids do this a lot, but like a schoolgirl just pees in their like front lawn.
Well, it's like the back corner. It's like a little hideaway. Yeah.
It's like walled off, so it's not like people can see it. But it's like it's not like they're specifically doing it because it's their house, but they're just trying to duck into a place where no one will see them. But still, it's like.
Yeah, because as she's leaving, she says, "I think someone's living in there now," which says to me that this has been kind of just like an abandoned house that kids have used for various things, and including potentially if you need to piss, you're nowhere near like a house of someone you know or something. So no. I mean, I can't say I've ever pissed in a random house like that. No.
Yeah.
But hey, I don't know. I don't know what kids like today. Pissing everywhere with their urine.
That's true.
As opposed to other things.
And then again, like going back to that scene where she's like trying to find I think it was like the doctor's office that she's going to. Like even before she runs into those kids, like she's kind of just like getting lost in all these back alleys, and like there's this one kid that's kind of just kicking like a soccer ball against the wall that kind of just like looks at her like a little creepily, which I mean he's probably just looking at her because like, oh hey, who's this? But like again, the way everything is like shot and filmed, it like makes it like kind of weird and creepy and ominous. And then she kind of keeps getting lost, so, like she kind of runs into him a couple of times, which I don't know, it's just when you're watching it, it just feels very like well put together, and you can really feel like the horror of just like just being uncomfortable in your surroundings and just feeling like you don't belong, and everyone is kind of just like knows it, like just waiting for you to I don't know, do something you're not supposed to or whatever.
Obviously all the horror stuff does connect to their backstory and does connect to like what like this the point of the film and the metaphors that are at play, so we'll get into that in a little bit in spoilers, but I think I just really would like to emphasize that the performances of the two leads are very, very strong. And it is the central part of the movie, and the whole thing hinges on them, so it's good that they're great. So with that said, I will take this time to thank our Patreon producers at the time of recording. So thank you very much to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, Brett Williams, and David Brown. They're our Patreon producers for the month. At the time of recording, that is. Obviously, by the time you get this episode, it'll be way in the future. But you can, of course, you can, of course, support us for as little as $1 per month at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And for that $1, you get access to all the bonus episodes that we have in the back catalogue. They're on pause just now, and new ones will be back when Tim's back from paternity leave. But you get all them. $5 tier gets you early access to all the new episodes by a day, so go and have a look and see if you want to keep supporting the content and help us out. You can, of course, also support us for free by simply hitting the like button on YouTube, subscribing, commenting, all that stuff. We are all at the mercy of the dreaded monster that is the YouTube algorithm, and that's what deems our success or lack thereof, as the case may be. So
it's a real horror.
So hit the like button, for God's sake.
Just do it.
So yes, full spoilers for his house from this point on. And I guess just to talk about the film as a whole, obviously there's maybe some specific scenes we want to talk about. You know, even I mentioned buying the polo shirt earlier, because you know when the ghostly stuff starts happening, at one point he thinks that, oh, you know, we've been cursed, so we have to burn everything we brought with us, everything that, you know, connects us to home, we have to burn. So he burns all their clothes. But there's just and it never, and I was expecting it to lead to something in the scene, and it never does. It never actually leads to like a confrontation. But there's like a security guard who, as soon as he sees Ball walking around the stores, starts watching him and just lingers in the background, like always watching him, just thinking he's a thief. And it never actually builds up to like a thing, which I almost respect more. I respect kind of they're showing this kind of immediate racism of this guy, but it doesn't actually have to lead to a confrontation. It's just it's there. So
there's so much like so much like little racism that and I mean I think that's, you know, like one of the things I think is like really powerful with, like, you know, like the last couple of years we've been getting like, you know, more movies that are kind of, you know, dealing with issues like this, and it's one of those things, like obviously like, you know, Get Out is a big example, but yeah, I think it's good to have these movies that kind of highlight, you know, that okay, yeah, racism isn't always like, you know, some angry, you know, dude, you know, yelling slurs. Like, yeah, there's like so many like casual little things like this that, you know, maybe people might not even think about it consciously, but it's like, you know, this stuff kind of matters, and it can affect someone if, you know, they're constantly like being, you know, subjected to it. But yeah, like all these like little moments like really work well.
Yeah, but we have to have a big thing. So one of the things early on is that they talk about the daughter, and the daughter who seems to have died in, you know, on the boat trip to get to the UK, and it comes up a few times. You know, we see Bial kind of looking at this doll, and we see when she goes to the doctor's office, there's a sort of awkward scene here because this nurse or whoever it is who's helping her take her blood pressure and stuff, she starts talking about having a kid, and she's wanting to make small talk with her and make her feel welcome, so she's trying her best, but then Bial starts talking about the fact that she came from a place where there's like two warring factions, and that's why she has markings of two different clans on her, because like basically trying to not be killed by either one, and it becomes this very serious dark conversation, and this nurse is just completely like doesn't know what to say to her. Like, okay, you wanted to talk and get to know each other, but the second it got too real, and it's a really good emphasis of like, okay, these are two people from different worlds.
Yeah. Like you know, she just wanted her to like kind of nod and say like, oh, thank you, yes, it is very pretty.
Yes.
Instead, yeah, she goes into this like very dark monologue.
Yeah, and it's just like, yeah, from two different worlds, and like everyone in the UK that they've met just wants them to conform quickly and not have to put them through any awkward stuff, not have to put them through having to understand because their lives are just too busy or complicated, or they don't have the effort to consider the horrors that these people have went through. But you know, she has this awkward scene with the nurse, and then there's a scene later on that I really liked in retrospect once we sort of saw the backstory, because things get very tense later on where she wants to basically get kicked out, and she, after the hauntings have been happening, he gets really upset about it, and he goes to Matt Smith, he goes to Doctor Who to basically ask for a new house, and he's very kind of cagey about it, Matt Smith, and he asks like, well, what's wrong with it? Like, you have to give me a reasons, and then we have to investigate why, because if you're not fitting in, quote unquote, then you know there'll have to be an investigation, and maybe that'll lead to you being sent back home. And he tries to say rats, but he doesn't really buy it. It all comes off a bit weird. But when he comes round to investigate with someone to take photographs of the house, and by this point he's been hammering holes in the walls, trying to like find ghosts and stuff.
There's like one, yeah, like they're kind of like hearing stuff, and then this one kind of main ghost like seems to be appearing inside the wall, so it's kind of like driving them mad.
So when they come in and see this, Bial comes out, and she's sort of like taken like a bed sheet and made kind of like a more traditional dress that she would wear, from her home country, and says that they're cursed by a witch. And we'll get into exactly what the curse is in a second, like what she puts forth. But she says all this in front of this, this social services guy, and basically they leave saying, well, they're probably going home because they're clearly not fitting in and they're kind of crazy. And because of this, because they're going to get sent home, he gets very protective. Ball gets very protective, and he starts basically taking off all the handles so that she can't leave. And it's almost like, should she be scared of him? Should she be worried that he's getting homicidal or he's getting deranged? And
I thought it was going there for a second.
Yeah, but then when she does actually try to climb out the window, we sort of transition into this extended flashback showing what actually happened, how they left the country, what happened on the boat, and what's going on. So this all ties in to a scene, but it's the scene where they're having dinner actually, where she tells the story of this sort of witch doctor. This was it an apis?
Apith, something
Apith,
like that. Yeah. I think they call it a night witch.
Yeah, so she tells the story of this man who wanted a house, his own house, so badly. And this is obviously where the title of the film comes from, but also the fact that, Ball keeps saying, this is our house now, this is our house. But the idea that this guy wanted a house so badly that he started stealing from people. So he didn't really earn the house. And because of that, this curse became upon him where he had to give back what he took. Otherwise, it wasn't really his house. But he'd done awful things just to achieve this home. And obviously, as she's saying this, you're thinking, okay, clearly she thinks they have done something bad to come here to achieve this, and that's why they're cursed. That's why this witch is, there's a witch's curse on them.
Yeah. So essentially, I think what it was coming down to is the legend of this Apeth or whatever is that it's if you take from it, or I guess just in general, if you incur a debt, then it must be repaid. Otherwise, it'll haunt the shit out of you, basically.
Yeah, so obviously that gets you thinking. But there's a scene that I really liked in retrospect later on. It's just before he starts, I think, locking all the windows and taking all the handles away, where they're arguing about remembering where they came from, and she goes to mention their daughter. She starts a sentence and says, and you would rather forget our daughter. And before she finishes the word daughter, he kind of puts his hand over her mouth and sort of steps in close. And it's very intimidating. In the moment at the time, it's very intimidating. And you sort of read it in the scene as no, he's not. He wants to forget this. He wants to forget that they lost a daughter. And he comes off as very intimidating because he sort of grabs her really quickly and puts his hand over her mouth. In retrospect, this scene actually feels a lot more even. Because when we find out that they never really had a daughter, and that it was all phony, and that she thinks they had a daughter, it comes across more that he's getting frustrated that his wife's going crazy. Because you realise that from his perspective, she's actually so delirious with all of her feelings and her mixed emotions of these hauntings and what's going on, that she actually believes they had a daughter. And when we see what the context is, we get a couple of big shocking things in these flashbacks. One, there's a scene where it transitions from her kind of in a dreamlike state talking to these characters at I don't know if it's a school or if it's just a meeting area or something like that, but she's with all these other women, and eventually we cut to kind of him, Ball, coming to find her and yelling for her, and he comes and finds her hiding in a cupboard. But when he takes her out the cupboard, there's a really neat reveal here where the camera spins round and reveals the entire room is full of dead bodies. All the other people who were here were massacred. So this memory, perhaps the start of her starting to repress memories, was this she was the survivor of a massacre, where every single person there was shot to death, and she escaped by hiding in a cupboard. And that's kind of okay, we have to go now, and we see some of their journey across their own country, eventually getting to this bus where. And it's this, this horror thing where at one point they're hiding on a roof and there's people on fire walking down below in the street. It's really horrific, and the real world horror of it all. But then they get to this bus, and the woman at the bus is there's no more room. We can't let anyone else on to go to the boats. We can't let anyone else on. Only children now. And Ball looks down and sees this girl, because there's a quick scene at the start of the movie. I think it's one of the scenes after this where they're loading onto another truck and they've got this girl. So you say, oh, that's their daughter, right? So then later on in the movie when they're talking about losing their daughter, like, oh yeah, that's who we saw at the start. We saw them with their daughter. But it's not. He just sees, it's basically that scene in Titanic where Billy Zane just sees a kid and picks up the kid and pretends it's his kid. He does this, and it's kind of like, okay, this is bad enough, right? This feels kind of sketchy. This feels kind of sad. But then you hear a woman yelling for her child, and that's how that's why they know the name of the girl. They know her name because her mother was yelling because she's obviously realized she's looking for her daughter. She's yelling after the bus, "Where's my daughter? Give me my daughter back!" And
like extremely sad.
it's really sad seeing it, especially since the daughter is starting to sort of yell and cry for her mum, and Ball is kind of holding her saying, "Shh, it's okay, shh, it's okay." And Bial's watching this kind of from a distance, also sitting on the bus, kind of feeling like almost horrified by what they've just done.
Yeah, and I mean, the movie doesn't really go into it too much, but I also get the sense that it's like you kind of feel like everyone on the bus knows, but it's like they're in such a dire situation. It's like, we have to go. We cannot stay here. That it's just like this, which in almost any other circumstance we would think of would be like a horrific thing. Like people would be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, stop the bus. Like, but
the last thing they want is that bus to stop.
Yeah, so everyone's just like quiet, and it's just like except for the mother banging on the windows, and it's just really tragic.
And it's very eerie because everyone is just so quiet and just lets it go. And we don't see like a lot of what happens on the boat, but we get a sense that they all end up in the water, and there's like a lifeboat like saving, and there's like quick shots of like Ball who grabs Bial. He wants to save his wife, and he's like taking her towards the boat, but the girl's left to drown. Lots of other, and basically what you realize at this point in the movie is that all of the other ghosts that pop up in the background are all just all the other people who drowned on their way here. So when I say there's a theme to the ghost, there's a lot of like water. At one point when he's pulling cables out the wall, there's a lot of seaweed on it. At one point when he's sitting eating dinner and he's on his own, the camera pulls back and reveals like the little kitchen table sitting in the ocean. Really nice visual.
Yeah, I really loved all these touches. Like whenever it would kind of like meld their actual like house into the past. It just looked really cool. Like you said, it's a good visual. Is it was also like very kind of eerie, but it just like looked cool.
Honestly, you could almost argue the horror stuff is all in their heads anyway. There's one or two small things that kind of implies that it isn't. Like, the idea that he burns her pearl necklace and then it comes back. The idea that there is actually a hole in the floor from later when like the night witch or whatever he is comes through the floor. It appears that there was a hole there later that they didn't make themselves. So there's a couple of hints that this is all actually going on. But you could almost just take it as them working through their guilt, working through the survivor's guilt, the guilt of what they did by taking that girl and then leaving her to die. So you have this double thing where he's kind of ignoring his guilt for what he did to get here, and you have this irony of that sentence, make sure you're one of the good ones. And I think even though obviously that's coming from this like casually racist place, there is kind of this sting for them where they don't feel like one of the good ones because they feel like they've done something really bad to get here. And I think maybe even part of the meaning behind the film in a lot of ways is that a lot of people who are refugees who have to like fight their way out of like countries to get to somewhere, whether it be the UK, the US, wherever they're going, a lot of people do have to do a lot of bad things or have to go through a lot of turmoil, and not that a lot of them do something this bad specifically, but the idea of like the guilt of like making it to somewhere else and surviving when other people you cared about didn't, and did you not so much like sacrifice anyone, but the idea that you, and making sure you like made it to a bus or made it to a boat or made it out of there, did you just by your persistence kind of leave someone else behind by default? And how common is that a feeling for refugees? I imagine it probably is quite common. There's people they cared about that they knew, in their society that they've left behind. Obviously this is a really dark example where they literally kidnapped a girl and let her die. That's a very specific big thing. But and the idea that at the end of the film, it's because the ending almost isn't that much of a horror movie. Like it has the big horror movie moment where he does like cut himself because the idea that the blood will you know, because he has this realization at one point in one of the sort of horror nightmare sequences where the ghost can't hurt him. The witch doctor or the night witch can't hurt him because he's not real. He's like a supernatural thing. He puts his hand in the because it's like he's in like a campfire area, and he puts his hand in the fire and it doesn't hurt him because it's not real technically. And he's like, oh, you can't hurt me. You're just images. You're just memories and images of the past. You can't actually hurt me unless I hurt myself for you, so you can come and take me. And so the big turning point for him is that he actually chooses to cut his arm because the Night Witch is also trying to convince Bial to cut him as well. He's trying to turn her on her husband. And he cuts himself to accept responsibility for what he did because he's the one who picked up the girl. He's the one who kind of is the most responsible. But I think it says a lot for the meaning of the film that Bial's the one who then comes in and saves her husband by killing the Night Witch by stabbing him or slashing his throat or hitting him from behind.
Yeah.
The idea being that she's accepting that they have to in some way accept what they've done and move on. Yeah, like they have to accept and move on. Yeah.
Yeah, they essentially kind of switch like, positions where she'd been, if you want to say like, she was kind of, stuck in the past or whatever, and he was trying to move forward, and now he's finally, accepting the past, and she's like ready to move forward. And I mean, you said it earlier, they kind of have to meet in the middle, which is ultimately what happens. And
it does end with this, and this is why you could almost argue that none of this is real in the sense that at the end of the movie, they're at a place where, okay, they're at peace, they're ready to actually sort of live here, and they've met in the middle, and they're inspected again, and they've fixed up all the holes in the walls, but they've got like a rug over the big hole in the floor where the the demon witch thing came through. But it's kind of like, they're ready to move on now, and there's like a moment where Matt Smith says, so that witch that you said was here, how's that going? And I actually laughed. I thought this was a really funny line where Ball just says, "Oh, my wife killed it." It's just really, really deadpan, almost. And I thought that was a really funny delivery. Yeah. And Matt Smith almost kind of chuckled a little bit, like, "Oh, it's dealt with." But I mean, but it also means something to the characters that they have expelled this demon that was haunting them. This idea that they had to get over everything they'd done to get here and left behind, and accept what they've done, but move on from it at the same time. So. It's about guilt. It's about, and survivor's guilt. And we mentioned survivor's guilt in the last review we did as well, but I think that's also a factor here.
For sure, yeah.
But the performances are great. There's a scene where Ball goes to Matt Smith to try and ask for a new house. Towards the end, when he's getting frustrated because Matt Smith's kind of not responding to it, and he's asking questions, and it's this sort of really depressing, like clinical office like atmosphere of you can just hear the photocopier constantly going in the background. There's this really great bit of the performance towards the end of the scene where Ball's like, he's holding a glass of orange juice they've given him, and he crushes it in his hands. But as this is happening, the way he's like sort of like trying to smile and try and pretend that he's okay and normal is really unsettling in a way that he's like really struggling. Because ultimately all this is really about is the horror of trying to, and just the stress that this change puts on someone. And how it's not easy, how it is this difficult, life-altering period of someone's life that no one seems to have any sympathy for, or believe that they're going through. So,
and there's a really great scene where I think it's maybe one of the first times he maybe encounters a ghost, and he's like running away from it, and he runs outside into like his little, kind of like back alley or whatever, and like. He just like looks up and there's like this neighbor lady just looking at him very, judgingly, and like he's very like freaked out and out of breath. But then as soon as he sees her, he kind of like chuckles and is like, "Oh, hey, nothing wrong." But then there's a great like really creepy ominous shot though of just him looking back inside, and it's just it's nighttime, but it's still light all around except for the inside the doorway is just like completely black, and just this idea of like, okay, I have to go back. I'm freaked out. I have to go back in there, but I can't look. I have to look normal in front of all these other people. And it's really, like, he just delivers such a good performance.
It's a constant theme of the movie that like everyone else doesn't want to deal with what they're going through or even know about it. They just want them to fit in and not. So they feel that they can't show their weakness, their They're what they're going through. They have to hide it. They have to shelter it all. Bottle it all up because no one else wants the burden of what they've went through. And that's I think a lot of what the movie's about. But then them also dealing with their own guilt. No one's there to like help them go through it or talk them through. Like maybe something that a refugee who's been given asylum should be given. Maybe it's like some therapy or something. Because it is like a really
yeah
turmoil experience of things and.
Yeah.
And there's some really nice visual touches. We mentioned them being in the ocean in the house a couple of times. There's a couple of months where he's standing in water. Even just something as simple. The time when he's talking to the actual Night Witch at the fireplace and basically realizes that it can't hurt him. There is a scene where the Night Witch kind of offers a knife, and it's just like two hands coming out of the darkness, and it's a really nice shot. It's a really creepy shot.
Yeah.
I think the most effective horror scene of the whole episode. It may be right after where he's sitting eating dinner and it's like in the ocean, but he's in the house again, and he's technically always in the house, obviously, but like in a sense that we're back in the house just totally. And he's basically seeing all the different adult ghosts, but then it kind of like, and he's sort of it's like really like ramping up. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of stuff happening at once. Because normally a movie will have a jump scare and then that'll be it. It'll deflate. This just kind of keeps like hitting you with things like constantly in this sequence, and then eventually the small ghost with the really creepy mask, which obviously represents the daughter, but it's this really creepy mask she's wearing. Like it ends with her, and like the whole thing just keeps escalating. And that was from a horror movie point of view, that was probably my favorite section of the movie. Was that little 5-minute sequence?
Oh no, yeah, totally. And the all the horror stuff like works really well, and it the movie like flows very good too. Like it didn't, I'm not sure how long it actually was, but it didn't like feel long at all. Like
it's like 90 minutes. It's not a long movie. Yeah.
And like you said, like it does a good job of like ramping up like the horror and stuff, but then it's it's never boring at all. And even like some of the non-horror stuff, it's you get sucked into it pretty well.
Yeah, and I think what's effective about it as well is obviously there's the real horror of like how they're being treated and the coldness of it, and how no one's really like wanting to help them or go out their way to like understand them. I think that's there, and it does treat a little bit like that, like a horror movie. Obviously we keep going back to the scene of Bial like trying to find the doctor's office, but I think it's effective that most of the actual supernatural horror, if not all of it, is all relegated to the house and their past. Because I think the way the metaphor works here is that, okay, there's the obvious, the social difficulties that they're facing, which is important and is a horror, but the idea that the secret side that the British public or the public of anywhere that a refugee goes doesn't want to know about is the secret one. That's the one that's unseen, and that's the one that's the ghost in the house. That's the one that no one else gets to witness or ever knows exists. It's like it's something that's just there for them, that no one else can understand what they've went through. No one can understand the experiences that they experienced. In a country where there was tribes shooting at each other, all these massacres, things like that. So the metaphor there works really well for me, where their past is the secret one, which is the ghost in the house that no one else ever really acknowledges. Or so at the end of the movie when Matt Smith says, "Oh, how's that witch?" Like, he doesn't understand, and it's just this fake idea to him that it's this abstract idea. That really works. Whereas all of the social stuff, all the stuff of them fitting in, that is equally kind of like real, and it's equally a thing and a problem. But as Ball points out himself at one point when he's arguing with Bial about fitting in, and she says that this isn't home, we're not welcome here. He says, I mean, have you forgotten what we did to get out of there, or what it was like back there? Like, as much as this is difficult, like, think of where we came from, think of the massacres, think of, all these things. So, as bad as the world they're in now is, like, there was a real horror show that they left to get here. Not that in any way justifies or says, they should just put up with all this shit and the way they're treated. They shouldn't. Absolutely shouldn't. Everyone deserves better than that. But the idea of that the real horror is the life they left behind kind of thing. I don't know. There's a lot of mixed things going on here. There's a lot of strong emotions. There's a lot of I think good metaphors and messages, and it's kind of you mentioned Get Out earlier. I think this is an interesting one in that this is a more specific look at something. This is a very specific
Sure.
experience that it wants to look at. And again, the idea we talk a lot about with fiction, and especially with horror movies, the idea that you take the real horror of what these two people have went through, of asylum seeking and all the things they did to get here, and you turn it into a ghost. You turn it into an actual supernatural thing to, again, heighten it, to ramp it up, to turn it up to 11 and say, okay, this is what it represents, this is the metaphor, and you mix in all the things. So, you know, I mean, if you'd question me, what do I think an asylum seeker goes through who's come from a country where things are that dangerous? Like, I might, like, get to some of these ideas. I might say, oh, there might be some survivor's guilt, there might be this, there might be that. But this movie, you know, it conveys all of it. It gives you all these things that you might, as someone who has never had to experience, you know, escaping to another country for safety, for a better standard of living, for coming from this world, for all the way you're treated by the people when you arrive, all of these things. You might never actually realize all of these little things, and I think that's, you know, if there's anything that's important about art, is like sharing experiences and sharing empathy.
Oh, totally.
So
yeah, I mean, that's why, like, you know, it's so stupid when, you know, people, you know, like, people get upset about, like, oh, like, you know, like diversity and stuff, and it's like, no, like, this is why you need, like, you know, different, you know, voices and art and stuff to you know, to illustrate these different kind of lives and viewpoints. And so, yeah, you're not just stuck, you know, seeing the same dumb people that are just living your life over and over again. It's I mean, it's, I don't know, a little bewildering than people like don't like this stuff, because it's, you know, as like a, yeah, like also as a person that, yeah, has never had to go through this, it's, you know, I think it's fascinating and it's emotional, and, you know, it's important to watch stuff like this and, you know, see these different kind of lives.
And, you know, it's funny because you do have people over the past, like, say, decade or whatever, who complain about diversity, and there's a, oh, we're doing a superhero movie that has someone who isn't a white man. Oh, what was this? I know, the horror. I think obviously the hope is that for future generations who are used to growing up with a very diverse mix of movies and TV and art and all these other things, is that it'll be so normal to them that they'll look back at this time and look at people who say things like that and think, what?
Yeah.
Like, why would you ever think that? Why would you ever consider that? You know,
hopefully, yeah.
That's the importance of representation, is that we, over time, get rid of some of these, like, you know, institutionalized, like, ideas and the idea of the normal and the other, and no, everyone's normal. Deal with it. Yeah. So,
and it's, yeah, like, not to go like on a rant or anything, but like, I think it's so funny when you see someone who is complaining because, yeah, they're adding more diversity into these shows and movies, and they can no longer relate to the characters, so they're upset. And it's like, yeah, well, that's how everyone else feels when that, like, you know, everyone that's not like a white dude, that's how they feel when they can't, you know, relate to these characters.
Well, yeah, and that's looking at it from their perspective of not being able to relate, which to me is a silly in and of itself, because to me, like, I can relate to, you know, a toy in Toy Story. I can relate to an alien in a sci-fi. I can feel sympathy for a robot, and yet you think we can't sympathize and have empathy for human beings who have different experiences and come from different cultures, and, you know, dare I say, have a slightly different skin tone. Oh dear. How could we ever possibly relate to another human being or have sympathy and empathy and things? And this is, I mean, I don't know why we're going on this little tangent here towards the end of this, but I guess maybe it makes us think of that, because it is a, you know, as a film that's looking at a different experience from people who come from a different culture.
Well, yeah, I always say that it's a, you know, it's a good episode when we end it by solving racism.
I would never claim to do such a thing, Timmy. I only hope that our voice are part of a sea that help sway the tide.
Hopefully,
as time goes on.
Now I'm worried to look at the comments on this, because people might. Some people, I mean, most the kind of people we don't like might not be happy.
Most of the people who look for a review of his house, I imagine, are probably okay with this kind of talk.
That's true.
That said, never underestimate the assholes who will go out of their way to look for something just so they can comment saying, "Why are you talking about this?" Blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
I'll never forget when me and Carl reviewed the first episode of Dear White People. Like one of the comments being like, "Why are you reviewing this propaganda? Propaganda?
Oh God.
Anything that has a different idea is propaganda." Yeah, okay. All right, so here we go. That's his house. It's a very good film. Obviously, it has a lot of social commentary, a lot of political commentary, but more importantly, it is a horror movie that takes a real world thing that people go through every year, and not specifically from this country, of course, just the general idea of asylum seeking, and makes it into a horror story and uses the horror to explain the feelings that people have in that situation, which is some of the best types of metaphorical horror you can have.
Sure.
So I would recommend it. So with all that said, Tim,
Yeah.
what are you going to rate his house?
I think I'll give it an. Yeah, I'll go as high as an 8.5. I think it's really good. This is actually my second time watching it because I did watch it. I forget if I snuck it in to my October viewing or if I did it because I think it came out a little late in October. So
I could I'm just looking at it just now, so I can tell you it was the 30th of October it came out, so it was right.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I must have watched it at some point in November. But I mean, yeah, I had no problem rewatching it again because again, yeah, the performances are great and it's not like a long movie like you mentioned that like it does kind of just go by like pretty quickly, but you get sucked up into everything, and the story's great, and again it's just it's a good movie that's actually has something to say as well as being a having the good horror elements to it. So yeah, I'll go as high as an 8.5. I think it's great, and it's I mean obviously 2020 was bad in very many ways, but I feel like we were very down with a lot of the movies we were watching. I don't think because we're talking about if we would even do like a top 10 or whatever, and it was kind of like I don't know, I feel like there's not like a lot of movies I'm like super crazy or passionate about, but I feel like all the movies we've been doing for this catch-up month have all been like great. Like I've been like, oh man, if 2020 was just filled with like all these movies that we've been watching, it would have been like a great year for horror movies.
Yeah, I mean, arguably it is. It's just a case of finding the right ones and so on.
Right. Yeah.
I will be doing a top 10 in your absence since you're going away for months. But I can tell you right now, there's at least a couple in the top 10 that I have kind of mapped out in my head that you do not like or did not see.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Basically, I'm saying a better Streams After Midnight top 10.
Oh my.
Like your typical standard. I should probably mention the scene that's on the poster actually, which is
sure.
at the end of the movie. There's just a sort of visual moment where they're standing in the house and they're standing around. I presume the people that are standing around them are other people who have made it out, who made it to either other countries and are refugees, and they're looking down the hall to all the people who didn't make it, all the people who were either died in the boat or maybe died, the people they knew that died in the massacre that she was a survivor of. And the idea being that they're all here with them. The idea that that this is an important part of the journey. It's a really poignant moment. But so the moment in the poster obviously looks really just kind of boring because it's just this couple standing surrounded by people. All the context of what it means isn't there in the poster, so it just looks like a shot of people standing there. Whereas in the movie, it's this moment where they've embraced both their past and their future, and it's so. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Anyway, my rating.
That is interesting, yeah. Because just to comment on that, that is a very good point. Because if you look at it without any context of the movie, it is kind of like, I don't really know like how this is really selling the movie. But if you do watch it, it is a very poignant moment that you're like, oh, okay, I get it. But I don't know. Maybe it. I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah. So my rating, that's another tough one. I'm going with an 8 out of 10. I think it's a really good movie. Performances are probably the best thing about it. And I was a little bit worried that the ending wasn't going to land for me. I was a little bit worried when it started getting a little bit wackier, where he was starting to act crazier, that it was going to just feel a bit more generic by the end. But when it started doing all the flashback stuff and that really came into it, I was like, oh damn, this movie has like bite. It has like a proper dramatic bite. beyond just like the general commentary it's had throughout, but like, oh no, now there's like an emotional kind of big moment in their past that feels like they're really getting over by coming out of it. So I'm going to say 8 out of 10. But it is definitely a drama horror. I wouldn't say it's again, this feels like a weird distinction to make, but it's not a full-on horror movie in the sense that it's not just 100% a horror film. It is definitely, a social commentary and a drama equally as a horror movie. So I'd say keep that in mind if you watch it. Because, I mean, when it starts off, it doesn't feel like a horror movie. Up until the first time you hear something in the house, it doesn't even really feel like a horror film until then. Then, of course, it changes, and it changes. But the direction is really strong, and it's a first-time director as well for a feature length, so that's really cool. But like I say, the performances of the two leads are wonderful. So 8 out of 10 from me. So there we go. That is His House. If you made it this far into the review, put the word polo shirt.
Okay.
Put the word polo shirt into the review. It's actually 2 words, but you know what I mean. Whatever. So let us know you got this far. Tim's going to pose for the thumbnail. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, pose. Okay. Nice casual head tilt. I like it.
I can't do anything too silly for this movie.
That's fair. I'm a little bit worried about looking at the IMDb user reviews.
Oh boy.
For this one. I mean, the first one's quite. The top review is quite positive. Brilliant on several levels. We need more like this and less junk in the horror genre. Brilliant,
Sure,
must
I agree.
watch. 10 out of 10s, 8 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s. Yeah, there's a lot of positivity, to be honest.
Good.
But yeah. A couple of people who gave it like a middling score said it was a bit too slow for them. But I mean, that's not. I mean, I don't agree with them, but it's not the bad take that I was maybe expecting from these.
Sure. Yeah.
From these reviews. Admittedly, though, maybe IMDb's monitoring them, so there's no dodgy ones in here.
Yeah.
That we might have expected. But
yeah, I mean, I would also assume again, because we're kind of talking about it earlier, but I feel like it's not like a super well-known movie that was advertised all over the place. So the most people that are watching it are probably people that are kind of aware of it or are seeking it out because they know either what it's about or maybe or other people that who's they listen to that likes that kind of thing might have recommended it. It's not something that I feel like would just be like at a theater with like a like Insidious movie or something that someone would go in and be like, oh cool, Haunted House movie, and then be like, what is this?
yeah, it's not been reviewed by is what you're saying.
Right. Sure.
Going to note that down to bleep that out later for the comic effect. So yeah, there you go. That is His House, Netflix original film. Hey, occasionally they do put out a good movie.
Right.
So worth noting.
I am assuming though that it's like I'm assuming they just acquired the movie.
Sure.
And put it on. Like I doubt that Netflix was like, wow, this is a project we believe in and we're gonna fund it. And
yeah,
I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but
well, it was Regency Films at the start, the logo.
Okay.
So I assume they did just get it from them. Maybe they co-funded it though.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'd have to look
like,
into it.
Yeah, usually my go-to is usually if it's a good movie, then it's probably just a movie they acquired. If it's bad, it's probably like a Netflix original that they like built from the ground up.
I'm pretty sure there's plenty of bad ones they also acquired. I'm not ready to make that distinction.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm pretty. I don't know if they acquired like something like say Open House, but like it could have been acquired.
Maybe. Yeah.